After the disappointing release and content of Battle for Azeroth, I quit WoW. A year and a half went by where I wasn't plagued by dailies and I was allowed to play other games. I even had time to find a girlfriend and get a job. I hated it. When I was handling transactions for a multi-million-dollar corporation, I couldn't stop thinking about the amount of hours thrown away into World of Warcraft. All of the hours spent making characters, leveling them up to 20 and deleting them, buying a WoW sub on my mom's credit card without her knowing, running through world content, doing dailies, getting kicked from raids for not doing enough damage, finding guilds to raid with after every time I took a break from the game, running raids with the boys, stealing loot from the boys, topping the DPS charts, going back to farm old raids for mounts and transmog. World of Warcraft was the pinnacle of every day for me. There were other games I would play that were fun, but WoW was at the center of it all. After getting burnt out from Halo 3, Borderlands, or Skyrim, I knew World of Warcraft was waiting for me to hop back on. I couldn't wait to hop back on it either. It's like every short little break I took, I would come back to a new feeling in the same world filled with nostalgia. These feelings started to fade away with the release of Warlords of Draenor though. It became harder and harder to come back after each little break, but luckily, Legion came out. Legion was WoW's redemption for me. It felt completely new and very ambitious, with a story that brought everything from previous expansions together. The big bad of World of Warcraft was defeated at the end of Legion, and with it, my thirst for the game. I had heard rumors of a faction war expansion, and everyone around me was excited, except me. But eventually I wasn't alone. With every tiny bit of BFA news being announced, it seemed weird. Nothing was finished up until the launch. Even then, it didn't feel finished, and it was clogged with systems that were painstakingly terrible. My guild disbanded, and I felt alone in Azeroth. I was sad. But then real life came into play, and I got a job and a girlfriend. Thankfully, a glimpse of hope came out. There was a cinematic that boomers were upset about because it made the Lich King look weak, but I was ready for WoW, and it was ready for me. I was ready for another redemption arc to save Azeroth. I had to look back on the Shadowlands and give all my thoughts after it seems that a third of the content has been released, or a third of the life cycle of Shadowlands is over. I'd appreciate if you guys dropped a like on the video and subscribed if you like the content. I was super invested in all of the pre-expansion hype for Shadowlands. I followed the Shadowlands content religiously, and I even made a guild with a bunch of friends to go beyond the veil. It felt like a brand new world. I mean, it was the realm of the undead. It seemed like everybody who left WoW because of Battle for Azeroth was back and waiting in Stormwind to be let into the Shadowlands. Me and 4 other friends took a week off of work to experience this new realm. Seeing Bolvar again and talking to him was super cool, and when I first set foot into Orboros, I had to stare at the beautiful skybox that the artist put together. After staring around at the different realms of the dead, we entered Bastion, the realm of the selfless and home to Uther. It was very fun. The characters felt new and the zone looked amazing. I couldn't get over the zone looking like Elysium taken straight out of Greek mythology. It felt like only the worthy were allowed to roam the fields of seemingly Eden. Along the way, I felt attuned to these holy plains by using their abilities to slay the unworthy and defeat the invading realm of Maldraxxus. When we entered Maldraxxus, a completely different tone was conveyed. We went from fighting to structure order in the Shadowlands to fighting for seemingly the opposite at first. Launched into a pandemonious mosh pit of fighters, it went from being beautiful holy fields to jagged aggressive dark mountains and valleys. I felt like a true warrior who was tasked to bring together all of Maldraxxus under one single banner. I was also given their ability to use, even though it felt like as a warrior, it made sense and was immersive. After all of this fighting, Blizzard does something great and adds another very beautiful zone into the mix as a palate cleanser from all the fighting. Entering Ardenworld felt like entering a Disney movie in the best way possible. There were critters peacefully trotting around, and it was refreshing to see life after so much chaos and death. There were beautiful trees with canopies that weren't unlike galaxies. It was harmonious, and I was attuned with a new ability that felt good and fluid. Even though this zone was peaceful, there was conflict, but I was itching for more. Enter Revendreth. Revendreth was the pinnacle of questing in Shadowlands. The mood of the zone is perfect. The arrogant aristocrats drunk from power using the pores for wealth. Sarah Nathria's introducing himself to you, fighting against the tyrannical wealth in the Shadowlands was incredible. I was attuned with another ability that felt smooth and natural. We were introduced to the Maw for a second time, and Torghast for the first. The thread of the first raid was very well established and charismatic. There was even an amazing cinematic at the end of the zone that made me so hyped for Castle Nathria. It was unbelievable. Now, after questing the Shadowlands, the flaws started to show up a little bit. Covenants are an awesome idea for the game if they had nothing to do with player power. People have talked about it over and over and over again, so I don't want to harp on it, but the soulbind system felt stupid, and it felt like wasted development time that could have been used to create more dungeons or add more content to the launch of Shadowlands. And Covenant abilities are a joke, and I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of that. I don't want an ability tied to a cosmetic thematic thing. Anyways, everything else with the Covenants felt pretty alright. Another mobile game shoved into WoW, but I became nihilistic about it, so I just stopped caring about it. The unique Covenant buildings and anima stuff was fun at first, but eventually it felt kind of tiresome and pointless. It's not that it was bad content per se, more that it was too time gated, and they expected us to work on that content for around 8 months when we all knew it was going to get easier in the future patch, so why work on it? Covenants were and are just kind of whatever. They would have been so much more amazing if player power wasn't involved and if they gave us more anima to start. After you get your Covenant, I think one of the hugest features that was teased to us was Torghast, so I figured why not give that a go. Torghast was fun, and it felt fun for the first couple times, until I realized I had to do it every single week if I wanted to keep my legendaries up to date with the raid content that I felt like doing. It felt like Torghast, as everyone calls it. I really don't think there are any huge flaws besides the fact that it's mandatory. They should just make only raids and dungeon content mandatory for the people who are really into PvE. Maybe toss in some gear for casual players to Torghast, and make Torghast mainly cosmetic. And with legendaries, they should have just been parts from professions combined with the powers from raids or dungeons. Fuck Soul Ash and fuck Soul Cinders. One thing I skipped over that you have to trek through in order to even get to Torghast was the Maw. The Dark Souls of WoW, they said. It just seemed a little unfinished at launch. If we look past the barren parts of the Maw, I understand what Blizzard was going for, and I applaud them for doing something a little bit different with the Maw and with Torghast. The Maw just wasn't very fun to go through and doesn't work in the model of WoW. I wasn't able to move around the zone very quick until twisting corridors, so it took a minute to get around. But the zone contradicted itself by not allowing you to be there for too long. It was a mess, but honestly, I liked it more than past max level content world zones like Suramar and all of BFA if we're being honest. I applaud them for trying something different, and honestly with the release of 9.1, the Maw feels amazing now. At the start of Shadowlands, there were only mythic dungeons. That was the main way to get the best gear in the game before the raid. Like the previous 2 expansions, it felt pretty good to go around to the different dungeons for the first 2 weeks and get the gear. It was pretty routine to the other 2 expansions like I said, but I think this part is done well. The dungeons looked nice and felt good to play through, especially the other side at the time. Now after Mythic Plus has been released, I feel very different about the dungeons. I am over Mythic Plus. I don't like how they've branded the PvE content as a PvP season type thing. Instead of doing seasons and Mythic Plus, why doesn't Blizzard just focus on making the dungeons more challenging at Mythic and make Mythic come out with the release of raids? That way the first 2 weeks of the expansion are heroic dungeons for gear, and for the casual players that want to do the normals they can. The heroic dungeons will be tuned up and have more mechanics like the current Mythic dungeons, and then they can focus on having complex dungeons with mechanics specific to that dungeon as the new Mythic dungeon. Even though each week is something different, it becomes routine. I don't know about any of you, but I didn't do specific dungeons because of the affixes that week, like the other side on Tyrannical. Mythic Plus in general makes certain dungeons feel a lot more tedious and annoying. The other side is a great example of a standalone Mythic dungeon that would work way better in the model I stated. But as soon as I went into Mythic Plus, I fucking hated the dungeon. Not to mention, I don't care about the speed side of Mythic Plus. I'm not a speedrunner. Let me go through a well thought out dungeon with more mechanics and unique aspects of each dungeon and learn the fights and not have to leave a group when we wipe on a large pool of trash. When Mythic Plus first came out in Legion, I thought it was a pretty cool system, but doing it over and over since then has really made me want to never step into a Mythic Plus dungeon again. The raids are far more fun to me, and advertising seasonal affixes and making dungeons into a greater rift turns me away. I don't have motivation to push keys and get an elemental mount this season when I can just get a slightly different color next season, or I don't even care about the mount. It looks really cool, but the Mythic Plus system just deters me away. Castle Nathria, on the other hand, was pretty cool. Castle Nathria was an amazing looking raid with pretty good bosses. I love the way the raid looked and how it felt when you walked in. Sire the Nathrius was a very well designed boss, from the actual boss fight to the introduction of himself in the instance. But like I said, they were pretty good bosses, not the greatest. There were a couple fights in the raid that felt annoying for the sake of being annoying. I don't like Inerva. It punishes everyone in the group for one mistake, and it makes going back through the raid again annoying. When going back through a raid, I don't want somebody who isn't fully there for whatever reason to wipe the group even though they know every single mechanic. Not to mention the mechanics aren't very fun to participate in themselves. Moving slightly to the left or running to an orb every couple minutes is pretty boring. Yes, there's the emptying of the containers, but that's not very fun to me either, to look at some bar and empty some tubes. Other bosses I didn't like too much were Houndmaster and Sludgefist. I don't have too much to say about these bosses besides that they weren't very fun for me or my guild. Sire the Nathrius is something that can't really be overlooked though. Throughout the raid, you see giant paintings of the Nathrius, and you can really tell that he designed the castle. And after all of the charisma, you enter his boss fight, which is done perfectly. I started trying to take raiding seriously in Legion, and Sire the Nathrius from memory is my favorite boss fight of all time. I love the boss arena changing as the fight goes on. I love the cleave at the start and throughout the fight. I love the crawling on my knees. I love the huge sword you have to dodge. I love the portals. I love Sire the Nathrius, from his character to his boss fight, and it's what really pulled Castle Nathria together for me. After doing the raid, I was ready to get some sick ass mogs and mounts. Of course, the glory achievement was pretty fun, but I want to go kill some rares and try to juice out all of the content around the Shadowlands. After doing the raid and getting a good bit of gear, it was time for me to run around the Orbos for 5 minutes, do dailies, and get mounts. Even though the highlight for most people is the actual raid and harder content, I have the most fun and the best memories running around with friends and getting collectibles. I just want to interact with content that makes my character look cool, and I want to enjoy that with my friends. I love the story, I love the raids, I love the dungeons before Mythic Plus, I like Torghast as a concept, but most importantly to me is the art and the social aspect of the game and how it brings everything together. I need the raids and dungeons because I crave them every single time they release, but my favorite memories come from running to a rare on my sick ass mount before my friend jokingly kills the rare so I have to wait. The amount of rares that drop mounts is really nice, and the world content I believe was very well done as well. My biggest complaint would probably be the amount of reused models for transmog and mounts. I wish so many of the mounts weren't just recolors and the artists put their talent to use. Of course, there are also World Quest to mention, which are about the same as dailies have ever been. They're alright and give casuals a reason to hop on. Sometimes people need a job outside their job, you know. With most of the content feeling great, Shadowlands was looking to be the redemption arc WoW needed. Well, until I only had about 30 days / played in Shadowlands at the time of 9.0 and 9.0.5. Before 9.1, I only had 30 days played in Shadowlands. That's after a third of the expansion's life cycle. That's way less than I have played in previous expansions. It's not because the content was bad, it's because it was the same content for such a long time. I don't even know how long it was around 8 months, but it was too long. My guild crumbled and everybody faded away from WoW again. I felt alone in World of Warcraft again. I was sad. I wish I was more understanding, but even with COVID halting the production as a good reason, I was way too burnt out to play Shadowlands. It seemed everybody was burnt out. I went on to live a normal life again. No longer was I a degenerate who sat in his room drinking Mountain Dew by the 2-liter. No longer was I on this great vacation. World of Warcraft needed yet another redemption arc. It didn't even need a redemption arc actually. It just needed more content. Or so I thought. You see, the problem with that last statement is that there were numerous amounts of content promised to the players, and I wasn't getting excited for any of it. There was the trailer with Anduin becoming a tool of the jailer, which, don't get me wrong, it's a beautifully made cinematic, but it didn't ignite anything inside me. I still didn't have the urge to play WoW for some reason. I wish I knew exactly why. I could say it's because of all of my other friends were still burnt out from WoW. I could say I was busy with things unrelated to WoW, like stuff going on in real life. What I think I should say though is far more upsetting to me. I was having a lot more fun with other games. I've loved World of Warcraft for such a long time, and feeling alone in this world has made Shadowlands feel unlike the past. I hoped that all of this content that was being promised to the players was enough for me, but most importantly, all of my friends to come back to the game. That's all I could do. I had to hope. The 9.1 finally released after a long span of 8 months. 9.1 marked the first large content patch since the release of Shadowlands. It was the beam of hope I was holding on to in order to bring that feeling back and encourage me to enter the Shadowlands again. No longer were running for mounts and transmog sating my hunger for this game. The first week of 9.1 though didn't live up to really anyone's expectations, and I guess that includes mine. It was filled with bugs that made the battlefield Ardenweald feel like a slideshow presentation. After trekking through the slideshow, there were cool videos presented at least. I really liked the cinematic where Tyrande and Sylvanas are fighting. It was a clash of titans that was more personal to us as we know these characters very well. All of the flips and flashy moves are appreciated, but for some reason I didn't feel nearly as attached to the cinematic as previous ones. I can still remember when Varian died and how it made me feel broken. When the cinematic from Nighthold was shown to me, I did everything I could to get into that raid and finish it. When Argus appeared in the sky, I couldn't believe I was actually going to a different planet alongside all of the other content released in Legion. The first time I saw Sargeras' in-game model, it left me jaw-dropped. Even the earlier Shadowlands cinematics left me astonished. For example, the final cinematic of Revendreth was done masterfully, but when Tyrande lost her powers and Sylvanas faded away, I felt kind of indifferent. This was the first time I'd ever seen a well-rendered in-game cinematic since Warlords of Draenor and felt no different after watching it. There wasn't any more emotion on the inside. Maybe a couple smiles and empty statements, but nothing on the inside. Something felt broken. After the cutscene, I went into the mall and unlocked Korthia, the City of Secrets. I was trying so hard to like everything showed to me. I kept saying to myself and out loud, the zone looks beautiful. These mounts are sick. This transmog looks amazing. And objectively, I do think that Korthia looks great. The mounts do look cool, and the transmog looks good. The thing was that there was no real emotion behind any of the statements. It seemed like the first time after playing this game for 11 years that I was apathetic towards everything. In the past, I would say something looks like dog shit, or that the horde looks stupid. But deep down, I didn't really mean it. Now I'm saying a bunch of positive things to my friends about the zone to convince them that it's great. Just maybe so that I could be tricked by them into thinking that I love the new patch. After unlocking Korthia, I went through the campaign given to us with a smile on my face, enforced by my friends in green with me with my statements from earlier. It was pretty alright, I guess. The mall got substantially better. I wish they would have released Shadowlands with a mall similar to this. Maybe back then I would have felt a lot more positive towards it. I did all of my dailies and weeklies and I felt alone again. Even though I was surrounded by players running through Korthia doing dailies, I couldn't help but think everybody else felt the same exact way. I got off WoW and only after a couple hours, and I went to sleep. I was laying in bed completely void of even the thought of Korthia. I woke up the next day, went to work void of thought, listening to music. Eventually it was time for me to clock out and go home, and I did. I took a shower, made myself some food, watched some YouTube, checked Twitter, and the last thing that I ended up doing was hopping on WoW. I wasn't excited to hop back on WoW, knowing that I finished all of the content for 9.1 week 1 besides Torghast. Sure, there are dailies and new reputations and rares, but I didn't really care. I hopped on WoW, did my dailies in about 10 to 15 minutes, went for some old mounts, and I hopped off. I hopped back on maybe 1 or 2 more times before week 2, and I wasn't filled with excitement. I even joined a new guild a week before 9.1 to go run Sanctum of Domination, but I really didn't know if I wanted to even play WoW week 2 and raid or do the new dungeon. I was having fun with other games, but at the same time I was sad. I would play other games and just constantly rethink about everything I've done. Did I really just spend half of my life in World of Warcraft? I could have been out with friends, making new memories. I could have been productive. I could have made money. I don't know. But I came to a realization before week 2 that it's like losing a loved one. Except this one can come back in the future. It's not lost time. It's valuable memories and experiences. I learned how to talk to people in Azeroth. I learned how to talk in front of large groups of people when I was learning how to raid. I learned how to take life a little less seriously when my friends would mess with me in World of Warcraft. This game really did do a lot for me, and I want it to be known. Before the raid Sanctum of Domination even released, I was mourning the loss of World of Warcraft. I hadn't forgotten it, nor have I had it in my mind all the time. It just wasn't the same. But in the back of my head, I know that if a new expansion or update is well received, I would come back. It was a huge range of emotions over just a video game. It's hard for some people to understand, but it's much more than just a game. There are emotions involved, friends involved, and I very much had that feeling of being alone. When Tuesday, July 6th hits, I had no motivation to do Sanctum of Domination. I looked at the raid and loot tables and realized something. I'm sick of the innovations Blizzard has made to the content in World of Warcraft. I don't want Shards of Domination. It just seems like a less interesting version of tier sets with more steps. I also don't want to do Torghast every week again, as I was pretty glad to not have to do it anymore. I don't care about Soul Senders. I don't care about getting more powerful legendaries, especially if it means running Torghast every week. I have other things I like to do besides World of Warcraft, and if hopping on WoW feels more like a job than a hobby, I'd rather do those other things. After waiting an extra 3 hours for the patch to launch, I didn't even want to hop on. I instead looked over and over again on Twitter and YouTube for Wowhead or anyone to release the raid cinematic. I even watched Asmongold and to just try and get to the raid cinematic, but that didn't work very well. He's wiped a bunch. I really didn't want to go into this second job. I just wanted to have fun, and I hope that the cinematic might give me a drive to do the raid. I finally saw the cinematic after WoW had tweeted it. Like I said about the Battle for Ironworld cinematic earlier, it looked pretty good visually. I'm just kind of apathetic towards it. There isn't much emotion in it for me. At that moment, I knew I was going to take a break from World of Warcraft. Maybe a future patch and nostalgia will shackle me to the depths of WoW once again, but seeing the jailer free himself really let me know I need to be free of this game. I really don't have much to say about 9.1 Week 2. I didn't even hop on because of the systems embedded in the game that I don't want to stand idle for anymore. I've kept up with the story up until now, and I probably will continue to. I think the story and art in World of Warcraft is done amazingly, and I don't want the artists to get a bad reputation for issues that don't involve them. I just don't want to have to drag myself through content I don't want to do in order to get to this beautiful art. BFA and Shadowlands have had very similar issues. They both suffer from a borrowed power system that don't feel good. They both have Mythic Plus, which I voiced my opinions about earlier. They both have an annoying max level system like Torghast and island expeditions or warfronts. And finally, they're both trying to piggyback off of systems that Legion successfully did. Sure, they fixed the legendary issue and the AP grind. Problem is that Blizzard tries to fix everything even if it isn't broken. Why? Why would you take away tier sets? Why? Why do we need borrowed power? Why give us a shitty max level zone when Blizzard could spend time on the systems they're good at? The raids in World of Warcraft have been great. Why not spend more development time to make more? The dungeons have been great. Why not work on the system I mentioned earlier? World of Warcraft, I've always said in the past, was my favorite video game of all time. My friends would be like, why? And I would go on a tangent about how it's not necessarily a perfect game, but I love it. I would never have even played BFA or Warlords of Draenor if I didn't have the great memories from the previous expansions. I've been riding a high of nostalgia for too long, and I think it's finally time for me to wake up. And hopefully a lot of people need to wake up to this too and respond to Blizzard without a veil of nostalgia over their vision. I've been too lenient in the past with everything. I would blindly defend WoW no matter what. Recently, I've been looking beyond this veil of nostalgia though. I shouldn't keep these negative thoughts about a loved one hidden anymore, because World of Warcraft doesn't seem to love any of its family members back. Like I have said, I love World of Warcraft. I know a part of me always will, but for now I think I'm just going to focus on other games. I'll just keep WoW in the corner of my eye in the hopes of seeing a little bit of change for the good. I will never forget the numerous lessons playing this game. I hate to say it, but every good story must come to an end. I just hope that this isn't the end of World of Warcraft.